Hey everyone, it's your favorite physiognomist and phrenologist. and I've been recently reading through the Phenomenology of Spirit by the philosopher Hegel. And I haven't finished it yet. Once I finish it, I'll make another video about it. But yeah, one of the more curious things that I wanted to make a video on that that he does cover kind of randomly when he's talking about reason uh in the phenomenology of spirit is he has a critique of physiognomy or physiognomy and phrenology, which for those of you that don't know, physiognomy or physiognomy is the belief that you can derive a person's character or what they're gonna be like from the way they look. Um and Phrenology is kind of like a subset of that was made more like scientific throughout the um 19th and 20th centuries, where basically they thought that um you could determine specific characteristics from a person just by like measuring their skull and stuff like that. And it started out kind of I'm not gonna go into the entire history of those concepts. Physiognomy or physiognomy goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. If you watch some of my other videos, and I have once again peeped those degrees behind there, but my degree in the liberal arts, you know, forced me to read a lot of the Greco-Roman Western classics, and you know, I don't think any of the texts that I had to read, it was a 2 year program, it wasn't the full program, had direct references to physiognomy, although it has been almost 2 years since I graduated, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but um although it was never directly referenced, there was this sort of undertone in a lot of ways where, like, essentially physical fitness was conflated with moral fitness or virtue. And while I, even as a person in a wheelchair, do regularly work out, I love it, I promote it, and I do think in some ways, we should get back to uh a conception of health that is that way, as the Romans used to say, mens sana in corpore sano, uh a sound mind in a sound body, or a healthy mind in a healthy body. um the Greeks and the Romans took it to just a whole nother level. They would make all these assumptions about you just because um you looked a certain way, or if you didn't look a certain way, or if you were fat, for example. Um and I'm not trying to condone that lifestyle, because I think any reasonable person would say, and I say this as someone who was unhealthily chubby, and has to deal with Latino, mestizo, and Southern European. Uh, in both indigenous and Southern European genetics, which make me thick, basically, which predispose me to being a thick boy. Um, like, there is a level where it gets unhealthy, but to completely make all these assumptions about what type of person someone is just based on that, ridiculous. And it would only get worse throughout a lot of the 19th century. But anyway, guys, that's just kind of the context. To see Hegel, a man from the early 19th century, when a lot of these ideas were somewhat new, right? And they hadn't yet like been absorbed into the like more calculated um scientific basism, because I can't say the other R word on YouTube, uh of like Francis Galton and all of these other Gobineau and stuff like that. To see a critique in Hegel so early on, I was like, wow. And this is around section 300 to around 350 in the Phenomenology of Spirit, my edition, which I don't have it with me right now, it's in my room. But my edition is the A.V. Miller edition, which has those sections, and he just does a brutal takedown of like physiognomy and phrenology, because he says it's like, and he actually does tie it back into the like his whole concept of the self, which he's where the phrase "the self is a relation which relates itself to itself" comes from. That goes hard. All of you that are Kierkegaard fans will know that from the sickness unto unalive. And yeah, but like he says, like no one can know the inner world of the relating of the self to the self of an individual. You can only go based off actions. It's absolutely ridiculous to like think that, something that we don't really choose, our physical appearance, others kind of choose that for us. Or some contingency like a bump here in the skull or a bump here over there can say so much about a person, because again, you can only really go off actions. Like, if you've shown yourself to be a dependable person and do good things and for people and stuff like that, well then we can be reasonably sure that you're a good person. Now, is that guaranteed? Obviously not, because some people are manipulative, and it only lasts so long and they have ulterior motives. But in the end, that's just something we can't know, right? Like, again, because the self is a relation which relates itself to itself, there's an inner part of us that is undergoing reflection and change and stuff like that, which no one can see. And it's obviously in being influenced by the world spirit and what he calls the super sensible world. We're not just animals reacting to external stimuli. We actually internalize. And while the factors affecting that are numerous, right? Like, it's just a part of life, a part of uncertainty that we have to accept. It's kind of this also, and he doesn't really mention this, but to me, it's kind of like the problem of induction, where this is one of those things where, you can't really make that much of a clear deduction. Like, you can't, of course you could assume things, but when it comes down to it, judging character is fundamentally a function of inductive reasoning. You can only go based off of the examples you have. uh just talking, in the relationship of an individual to an individual, right? And there's always going to be that doubt where, again, there could be a counter example, but, like, it doesn't really make sense either to just go full bore and say, like, no, this is definitely real, and, like, see, you just looked at me some way, or the way you look gives me vibes. And, like, as a disabled person, as someone who because of his visible disability has so many assumptions made about him, I was like, dang, Hegel might be the GOAT just for this. Like, it's such a forward thinking, like, I don't know, critique to to put in the book, and it ties in so nicely with the world spirit, and, like, thinking about the super sensible world and stuff like that, where it kind of just, it blew me away. And it's like he was so ahead of his time, because, and the reason you know that is because still today, bro, I'm sorry, the dark medicine, the pills and stuff like that, the dark pill and stuff like that, that's just, a lot of it is just refashioned physiognomy and phrenology. And while it's true that we do actually make judgments based on looks, that doesn't mean that they're actually true, right? Because, again, we can never know a person until we actually fully engage with them as human beings. And, I admire Hegel for coming out um at the time that he did, and speaking out against that, and saying that it was pseudoscience. Now, this is not to say that Hegel didn't believe some other stuff about things, like most Europeans of his time would have. Of course not. But he got this one right, and it's still so relevant to today because that stuff is still around. A lot of people still believe it. A lot of young people are, increasingly getting radicalized by that stuff. And here is someone from, 1818, I think, is when the Phenomenology of Spirit was published. And he knows it's BS. That goes hard. That's based. Uh, and remember, guys, don't judge a book by its cover. Try to not let your, or I shouldn't say that, because but try to bring out your subconscious biases based on looks and stuff like that, because that's really the most unspoken bias. And it hurts people with disabilities most of all. All right, see you guys. Bye.